Hey, morning, Annie.
How's it going?
Good. It might just be us.
I hope there's more people.
Becca and Ann both can't make it today, so
Yeah.
I became the facilitator as well as the presenter. Looks like some people are filling on. Morning.
Morning.
So I was just saying, Becca and Ann both had conflicts today. There's a wildland fire conference in Colorado, so I think a lot of folks might be at that. So I'm facilitating today as well as giving the presentation. But we'll wait a few minutes to see if anybody else joins.
Bergen, so I saw that you're stepping up as chair, or is it vice chair on the Council of Western State Foresters Forest Utilization Network?
Yeah, so it'll be vice chair. So
Okay.
looking forward to that and seeing what that entails. But hopefully
Yeah.
that just plan on completing a year of the vice chair position and then hopefully getting a grasp on things and maybe eventually becoming chair in 2023, but depending on how it goes.
Well, there's no eventually to it. That'll happen.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. It's good to keep that group moving.
Yeah, I think it'll be good to get more engaged and involved in all of that. So looking forward to it.
It's always a challenge to find cross-cutting issues across the whole Western United States for forestry perspective, but we've had done some good stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of good publications and all of that helped me when I started here at this position and everything. So I think it'll be good to keep that going for sure.
Yeah, cool.
All right, well, we might as well get started this morning. So as I mentioned earlier, I'll facilitate this one since Ann and Becca are both unavailable today, and figured we'd kind of follow the usual format. I think probably most of us know each other, but we can go around and introduce ourselves, where we work, and what our affiliation with the group is. And then, and I'll just call people off left to right on my screen for that. And then I'll give a presentation for about 20 minutes about contractor survey we recently did at the ERI. And then after that, we can go around and have a general discussion. So I guess I'll start with the introductions. I'm Damon Vaughn, and I'm a research associate for the Ecological Restoration Institute. And I'm working on forest operations and biomass utilization projects with them. And we'll go to Annie.
Hi, my name is Annie, and I am with SWC Environmental Consultants. I'm here in Flagstaff, Arizona. Archaeology by training, but I work in fire management planning and forest restoration and stuff like that. So, and I just wanted to plug the seminar, the SWERI seminar. I'm sure you will, Damon, in Albuquerque in November. Like, I will be presenting at that, and I'm super excited to participate. And SWCA is super excited to be able to sponsor it. So.
Great, thanks, Annie. I definitely will be mentioning that later. Let's go to Marcus.
Good morning, everyone. This is Marcus Kaufman. I'm the Biomass Resource Specialist for the Department of Forestry, based here in Eugene. And I'm one of the past vice chairs and chairs of the Council of Western State Foresters Forest Utilization Network. Thanks for, nice to see everyone.
Okay, Bergen.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Bergen Eskildsen. I'm the Wood Utilization and Business Development Coordinator for the Utah Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, focused a lot on economic development with the timber industry and connecting them to different state, local, and federal resources. I'm excited to be here and engaged with the group.
Thanks, Bergen. Let's go on to Jay.
Good morning, Jay Smith. I'm the Forest Restoration Director for Copino County. We do a lot of projects on the steep slope and in our flood control district.
All right. Archie?
I'm Archie Gray. I'm the Forestry Assistant Field Chief for Idaho Department of Lands in Coeur d'Alene.
Okay, and then Katie.
Hi, Katie Harrell with the Joint Institute for Wood Products Innovation. I administer that program for the California Board of Forestry and Fire Protection.
And then I also see a 928 phone number on the screen. I'm not sure who that is. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, Damon, hi, it's Ann Matek here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Good morning, Ann.
Okay.
Hi, Ann.
Good morning,
Yay.
guys. Hi, guys. I'm traveling, but I'm going to try to hang on the call as long as possible. And I really appreciate that Damon is taking over today, and I'm really excited to hear about his presentation, everybody. And anyway, in case you don't know me, I'm co-chair of this group, and I'm in Flagstaff, Arizona, involved with a lot of collaboratives here in the state, and then also a forester / sociologist. So looking forward to hearing what you did in your work, Damon. Thanks so much.
Cool. Thanks, Ann. Well, I guess at this point, I'll step out of my facilitator role and go ahead and share my screen with the presentation I put together. All right. Can you all see my screen? I'm
Yep.
guessing
Okay.
that's a yes. Cool. So I'm going to talk today, as I mentioned, about a project that we recently wrapped up at the ERI, where we did a survey of logging, mastication, and trucking contractors in the Southwest. And the primary reason was to get information for related to workforce training for a forest operations training center that the ERI is moving forward on. So I'll take this title slide to introduce my co-authors in the project. We had Dr. Kat Edgley, who's a social scientist in the School of Forestry, and she had a really essential skill set to get this going because I don't have a background in social science. So really essential to the project. And then of course, Dr. Hansa Pan, who's the director of the program I work for at the ERI, who has been pushing hard for the training center and wanted to get this survey done as kind of a first step. So here's a brief introduction of what I'll be talking about today, or a brief outline, and I'll start with a little bit of introductory material. So starting big picture with kind of changes over the last couple decades to the logging industry in the US. A couple of trends related to the workforce are, number one, a reduction in employment numbers, pretty striking, from around 170,000 in the 1950s, and basically a linear decline to somewhere around 50,000 today in the US. And a big reason for that is increasing mechanization. So even though the number of employees has declined, in general, productivity has increased throughout most of the country. Another big thing that comes up time after time in logger surveys is an aging workforce. So when they repeat surveys in the same area at intervals like 5 to 10 years, they tend to find that the workforce has been aging in place and not being replaced by a younger generation. And then another big headline is just a general need for more machine operators and truckers in the country in order to get the work done that needs to be done. So these bullets mostly came from this recent review, which is pretty thorough, from 2018, where they talked about these big trends over the last couple decades in the logging industry. And this paper cited a whole bunch of different papers from various parts of the country. You can see a couple of them here and their locations. One thing that really stood out to me are they're pretty much all from the East. There's only one paper that was from the West, and you can see it at the bottom there that they included, and that was from up in Idaho, Montana area. So none of them from the Southwest. So with that in mind, talk a little bit about forestry operations in the Southwest. As I mentioned, little existing survey literature. The only two that was aware of when I was doing this was a survey that I did with Kurt Mackus a couple of years ago about Colorado contractors, and then one from the ERI's sister institute in New Mexico. But in general, as most of us are probably aware, there's been a shift toward logging as a service. So rather than kind of an extractive industry, it's been viewed more as work that needs to get done for forest health needs, for fire mitigation. And that's had implications for how contracts are done and the productivity or the profitability as a whole of the sector. And we're dealing, of course, with mostly small diameter, low value timber, and generally from public lands. So there's issues with supply and stability of contracts. And those things kind of all go together to create a lack of markets. There's few processing facilities and long haul distances to reach those facilities. We also have an industry that's heavily reliant on chainsaw falling, especially when compared to other parts of the country. And chainsaw falling is, of course, there's fewer barriers to entry for that kind of operation, but it's also less productive than mechanical operations and much more dangerous for the operators. So a little bit on this slide about kind of workforce concerns. And I'll start with kind of a more national perspective. But this paper from 2019 identified a shortage of log and chip truck drivers that's expected to get worse without intervention. This paper from 2014 was looking specifically at the logging sector, and they kind of reviewed a couple papers and identified that there were a lot of concerns with recruiting and maintaining workers. And so, as I mentioned, these are both kind of national in scope. For a more local example from a very recent paper that Ann Matek of this group was a second author on. In 2017, the Forestry thinned 12,450 acres. And they used a workforce of 87.1 FTE or full-time equivalent loggers and truckers to get that work done. As we all know, the eventual goal of the Forestry is to scale up to 50,000 acres per year. And so that would require about 360 employees in the sector to achieve that work based on the numbers from 2017. And that's just in the Forestry area. So just the 4 national forests in northern Arizona, not including Colorado and New Mexico, which are the other states that we focused on in our survey. So huge expansion in the workforce is needed to get the work done that we need. So with that in mind, that's one of the reasons, the kind of motivations behind the Forest Operations Training Center that the ERI has been working on for the last, pretty strongly for the last year or so. You can see our logo on the right, pretty cool. So the training center will focus on loggers, truckers, and specialized maintenance technicians. In 2020, we received some funding from the Economic Development Administration to begin planning for the center. Not enough for implementation, but to get the planning phase out of the way. And the plan is to begin offering classes in fall of 2022, which is pretty soon. So there's a lot of good momentum in this direction. The ERI recently brought on Rich Edwards to coordinate the planning for the training center. And he's been working closely with Han to seek funding for the implementation phase of it. So with all of that in mind, that's kind of the stage for the current survey that I'm going to talk about today. And I'll briefly introduce the wood utilization team. You can see the logo in the upper left. We've got, with a grant from the Forest Service, allowed us to build this partnership with folks in Colorado and New Mexico. So we worked really closely with Tim Reeder in Colorado and Carmen Austin in New Mexico. And that allowed us to expand our scope because, the ERI, we're an academic institute in Arizona. So this really allows us to reach different sectors in different states more effectively than we could have on our own. As I mentioned, the survey, we focused on loggers, mastication contractors, and truckers. And we had 3 primary objectives. Number 1, to prepare for the Forest Operations Training Center by understanding the training needs of the contractors. These are the folks that will presumably be eventually hiring graduates of the center. Number 2, to characterize the current state of the industry. And number 3, to understand some of the barriers to success that the contractors. So I'll get into a little bit of the methods here. I won't spend too much time on this before getting to the good stuff. But basically, we had a 22-question survey. You can see the front page of it here. It was about 10 pages long with a lot of white space to make it more readable. You can see the breakdown of the question types we had, but my favorite was the final write-in box that we had, where we gave contractors about half a page to put whatever they wanted in there. And we got some good stuff there, and it was always interesting to read those. We did have the survey reviewed by a panel of experts. Kind of iteratively, we'd get feedback from them and change things. And that included contractors, it included people from other academic institutes, as well as government agency land managers. So we got a lot of feedback as we were developing the survey. And we also developed an online version using a platform called Qualtrics, which is pretty similar to SurveyMonkey, so that respondents could opt to respond online versus mailing in the survey if they wanted to. So developing the sample frame was one of the hardest parts because there's really not a great comprehensive directory for these kinds of businesses. The ones we were seeking out were generally larger scale contractors that could make an impact on a landscape scale versus as opposed to small private lot defensible space contractors or arborists. And we also weren't trying to include sawmills or any processing businesses just because that would have just been too broad of a scope. And generally when there are directories, they tend to lump all those businesses together. So it's really hard to separate them out and find the ones we were targeting. But the good sources that I used for Colorado, the State Forest Service has pretty good directories at the district level. And also Molly Pitts with the Colorado Timber Industry Association really came through with providing a lot of contact information and promoting responses amongst her members. New Mexico, Carmen Austin sent a directory that I don't believe is publicly available, but it was pretty useful to reach New Mexico contractors. And then in Arizona, Patrick Rappold in 2018 put out a directory that was pretty essential. And also Jay Smith was kind enough to share some contacts that he had when we were putting this list together. So the process kind of went like, I used all these sources to compile a massive master list of everybody that could be included. And then I had to go through and verify each business and make sure that they should be included and that they were still in business. And kind of felt like a wild goose chase at times because there's very little online information about a lot of these businesses. Then I updated the contact information to make sure we had relevant current addresses. And then finally, I had my final sample frame, which was about 341 contractors amongst the 3 states to send the mail out to. So we did, as I mentioned, a mixed mode survey, which means we had both mail and online responses. And we followed the Dillman protocol, which is kind of the gold standard for survey research. Basically just means you send out a survey and then you follow it up with 2 reminders to just annoy people and make them feel guilty for not responding. And surprisingly, it works. And every time you send out a reminder, you get more responses. And then we also followed up with some non-response bias phone calls where we took a randomly selected subset of the non-respondents, compared their answers and called them on the phone and compared their answers to see if there was any difference. So you can see our survey materials in the lower left. We had the packet, we had a cover letter, the survey, and then a prepaid return envelope. And then on the right, you can see about 340 surveys ready to go out the door. So we mailed the surveys in November 2020. And I don't know if anybody remembers November 2020, but it was a pretty chaotic time and maybe not the best time to be conducting a mail survey, as we found out. It did take a little while for the responses to start showing up, but eventually we started getting them in. And we kept the window open until March of 2021, which is a pretty long time, but we were receiving surveys throughout that whole time. And then they kind of started to dry up. And we received a total of 66 responses. And then in April, as I mentioned, we followed up with the non-respondents and talked to 11 of them for our non-response contacts. And you can see here the sample, or the response rate broken down by state. It's generally about 22%. which is fairly consistent with a lot of the published logger surveys. Seems like a low number, but this group has been consistently identified as pretty difficult to reach. So I was pretty happy with the 22% response rate. All right, so I'll get into some of the results about the business info, just some background stuff to begin with. So here you can see the kind of the main work focus of the businesses that responded. And we asked them what percentage they engaged in when it comes to logging, trucking, and mastication. So if they were split evenly, they would have done 33% of each, for example. And the main thing I want to kind of emphasize with this chart is that they rarely specialized in one type of work. So you can see in yellow shows the contractors that specialized in one type. And so there were only 10 that only did logging, 5 that only did trucking, and 6 that only did mastication. All of the other ones engaged in either 2 or 3 of these activities or a variety of other kinds of work. And we didn't ask specifically about this, but a lot of them kind of volunteered some information that they did construction work, landscaping, erosion control, snow plowing, and a variety of other jobs. And that kind of makes sense with a seasonal industry where contract availability can sometimes be a little bit spotty. So it makes sense to kind of diversify and have a lot of other ways to keep your crews employed and keep the revenue coming. Here's two charts that kind of give a little bit of info about the size of the businesses that we were surveying. On the left, you can see the investment category, which is the amount of money they had invested into their business. And on the right, you can see the employee count, the number of employees that each business has. And so most of these are small businesses. Most of them have under 100K invested, and most of them are under 4 employees, small crew size. But I think something that was pretty interesting is, we did get some responses from some quite large businesses. Just over a quarter had over $1.5 million invested, and quite a few of them had over 15 employees. So we really had a big range in the size of businesses that responded to the survey. When it comes to owner and employee age, I mentioned this is something that always comes up in logger surveys. And our survey had no exception in that generally the owners tended to skew on the older side. We had well over half of them were over 50, and over a third of them were over 60. However, one thing that our survey showed that I didn't see in a lot of other ones are that the employees were quite a bit younger. Lots of them were under 30, big proportion of them were in their 30s. And so what that shows is that if we do see, a lot of kind of the older generation retiring, there is definitely like an influx of younger people that are interested in the kind of work that could take their place. And we didn't ask specific ages. We grouped them by decade categories because we thought that was a little bit less invasive, or people would be more likely to respond. But a lot of them did volunteer with their actual ages. And I like this quote. We had a really positive response from somebody who had been around for a really long time, and he was proud to say that he was 75 and still logging. And he even sent me a picture of his operation with the response. So it's pretty cool. So when it comes to mechanization, I mentioned earlier that we do see a lot of chainsaw use for falling in the Southwest, and our survey results backed that up. What you see presented here are the percentage of contractors that reported that piece of equipment as their primary tool for felling trees. And so chainsaws and feller bunchers were tied at just under half, 43.4%. And then harvesters, much smaller representation at 13.2%. When it comes to skidding, really no surprise, overwhelmingly skidders and predominantly rubber-tired grapple skidders. But we do see a small representation of forwarders as well at about 14%. So what this can tell us is that really, when you're thinking about cut to length operations, which are typically conducted by a harvester and forwarder working in tandem, where some processing takes place at the stump and often the slash is left in the woods, that's not a really big piece of the picture here. Generally, the work is being done by either chainsaw or feller buncher, and then whole tree skidding back to the landing. I like this quote. I'm going to read this quote from one of the respondents. They said, "I would like to eventually move to a more mechanized operation, but that would require additional training. To be perfectly honest, I would like to have additional training opportunities to operate equipment myself." So this just goes to show the barrier that's in place if these businesses some of them that are more chainsaw focused want to move to a more mechanized operation. Sometimes even the owners don't feel qualified to be moving in that direction because they don't have experience or training opportunities on those machines. So here we've got the barriers to success. We asked this as a ranking question. So we had the respondents rank from 1 to 7, which barrier is most impactful to their business. So number 1 means it's the most impactful barrier and it's really holding them back. Number 7 is the least impactful one out of this list and maybe not quite so impactful. And so we did see that finding skilled workers was the number 1 barrier that the contractors identified, which was good to see because it really justified a lot of the work that we've been doing with a survey and with developing the training center. So now I'll talk a little bit about some of our results regarding the training needs for the respondents. We asked the respondents how many people they anticipate hiring in a couple different job categories over short and long timeframes. And if you aggregate it all together, the total that they indicated was 465.5, counting half or part-time workers as half-time. And I want to reiterate that's only for the 66 respondents for our survey. So if we're talking about the area as a whole, it's likely actually larger than that. The dominant category was when you see forest on this graph, that means machine operators in woods like skidder operators, feller buncher operators. That's the dominant category. But we also see a pretty big need for specialized maintenance techs and also truckers as well. When it comes to the education level that these folks are interested in hiring, overwhelmingly, they preferred graduates with high school degrees is kind of what they were looking for. And I was a little bit surprised at first that when you see FOTC on this graph, that's Forest Operations Training Center, that wasn't higher. It's at about 20%. And I think, unfortunately, one of the reasons is the way we worded the question. There's no training center that currently exists in the Southwest, so it could have been confusing to the respondents. They maybe didn't select it because it didn't exist. But we can't really tell at this point. I wish we could go back and kind of rephrase things, but that's what happens a lot with survey work, I think. But in any event, this does suggest that because respondents want to hire high school grads, it would make sense to make that a prerequisite for the training center, to make the graduates of the training center more hireable when they graduate. When it comes to external training, we asked the percentage of them that used external versus internal training. And what we found is that 86% of the respondents did not utilize external training at all, meaning that they had to do all the training themselves or rely on hiring prior trained workers. And the reason for that, as you can see on this pie chart, is overwhelmingly that it was the only option. Internal training was the only option for them. They didn't see any way that they could get external training. Some of them said it was too expensive. Maybe they would have needed to send their people to some other region of the country to achieve that. And a very small proportion said external training that was available was of low quality. We asked the respondents about their kind of safety plans that they had in place and whether they relied on formal safety plans where there's documents and protocols and regular briefings, or a mentorship approach where maybe they just have a more experienced employee look out for new ones and make sure that they're operating in a safe way, or an informal approach, which is just kind of whatever they wanted it to be. And what we found with our results is that a little over a third of them had formal safety plans in place. And by far the dominant tactic was more of a mentorship approach. We also found that if respondents receive reduced insurance premiums by having formal safety plans, there is a statistically significant association for them to have formal safety plans in place. And that's not really an earth-shattering result. It just kind of goes to show that these incentives work. If we encourage them to have formal safety plans by reduced insurance or some other means, then that is more likely to promote the development of such plans. And this is kind of a fun graph. I think we asked about how much experience was required to master various jobs within this field. And you can see them displayed on this graph from left to right in order of decreasing difficulty. And certainly this was biased towards owners because we were surveying owners, but that did turn up as the most difficult job. But maintenance tech, the limber operator, and trucker were also identified as some of the more difficult jobs, measured as how much experience is required to master that skill. On the lower end of that were loader operators, masticators, and skidders. And this is all underscored by this quote I put on the right-hand side. If I lose my good, one of the respondents said, if I lose my good mechanic, I'm retiring. I think, and that goes to show how important that skill is and kind of how in demand and rare it is to have a good mechanic. All right, so to conclude briefly, one of the things we wanted to look at is what role could the training center serve in the Southwest, both in order to promote restoration and also to help out the industry that's currently in place. And one thing, it can offer much needed opportunities for external training. We did identify a very big gap in training opportunities. And so clearly the Forest Operations Training Center would be well suited to fill that role. It could potentially assist the industry because they did identify their #1 barrier as finding skilled workers, and naturally graduates of the center would hopefully be, if not immediately skilled, they'd be already demonstrated that they are committed and have some really good background knowledge, and that can ease the learning curve on the job. As far as landscape scale restoration goes, the training center could hopefully assist in the transition to more mechanized operations, where we can achieve larger scale work and have it safer for the operators. Finally, some curriculum implications that we turned up in the survey. When it comes to machine operators, we did identify that Holtree, Feller Buncher skidding operations are the dominant ones being employed, and so it would make sense to focus on those machines with the training center. Not to say there couldn't be some cut to length kind of curriculum, but we really should be focusing on these machines to serve the current industry. Specialized maintenance techs are in pretty high demand, and it's considered a very difficult skill, so that is something we should emphasize with the training center. And finally, we should offer CDL and truck driver training to meet the trucker need. And I believe the plan is to partner with Coconino Community College for the CDL licenses. And they've been a solid partner in the development of the training center. So with that out of the way, I think should be plenty of time for questions today. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other again. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this point.
I just have to say I'm super excited about this training center, and I know I've expressed that. I actually was corresponding with Han a little bit. This was a couple months ago, because they see that you guys are going to require a high school diploma. Growing up, my dad was a principal of a vocational high school that, students that couldn't, the traditional academic route wasn't their jam. So they would go get training and they'd get their GED. And I had brought that up to Han, is maybe in the future, seeing what could be done with the center to get those, to bridge that gap between not having a high school degree and then people that can just enter the center with, enroll with a high school diploma. It was really successful. It was called the Career Tech Center, and it gave them, whether it was mechanical, mechanics or woodworking or more hands-on, because that's a different part of the brain for a lot of folks. And so and he was interested in that, but I just wanted to bring that up because I thought that would be really cool. It could be an avenue for our young people who just don't dig the high school curriculum, and getting them their GEDs and sparking that interest in the forest industry. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. That was, Han wants to talk to my dad, and I'm like, okay, I'll try to make that happen. So so funny. But yeah, it was just really great. It, instead of these young people dropping out of high school, they got and really important jobs in different industries and in different sectors. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And I'm just can't wait for the center to open and start to get some. I think this will be a huge key to realizing the treatments like what with Forestry and stuff like that we've been struggling with for years. So I'm your biggest fan with the training center.
Yeah, that's a great point, Annie. I think that I imagine a GED would suffice instead of a high school diploma. I think that shows a lot of initiative to go and get a GED, and I think I would imagine that would serve as well. We didn't specifically ask that. I kind of wish we had now that you mentioned it on the survey, but I would think that high school diploma includes GED.
So Damon, can someone that's in high school enroll in the program too? Could they be doing both? Some, at the same time, so that it would be kind of like a training while in high school. So when they're out, they would be nearing completion of the training program and jump into work.
Well, I think potentially one thing is I'm pretty sure that they will have to be 18, I would imagine, for insurance.
For sure on the safety part, but maybe there's some
Yeah.
classroom work or, just the safer side of stuff, the mechanic side, if you were in that line of training, or just, some ways around that maybe to get people going and keeping them in school and getting them on track earlier.
Yeah, that would I did this survey and I know a lot about the survey, but I'm not as familiar with the current plans for the training center because Rich, Edwards, and Han have been working on that a lot. That's something I can ask him about. I think I'm sure that's reading that they've been considering questions like that and deciding who would be eligible to enroll, but I'm not totally sure what their thoughts on that currently are.
Sure. I think it'd be great if you could do something like that. Just, you can get a lot more retention going with high school if you got people turned on to what they're doing afterwards.
Yeah, I will mention that to him. Dual enrollment with high school.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad to see this work happening. And one of the things I want to do is connect you with some of the folks that we're working with at OSU, at Oregon State College of Forestry, mostly because we face a lot of similar issues in Oregon, and clearly you all are taking a very rational, stepwise capacity building approach. And obviously we have a lot of our timber industry and logging contractors are it's a bigger pool, and there's a lot more equipment and mechanized work in it, but facing a lot of the similar aging workforce challenges and the need to lower the cost of treatments in order to support restoration. So I'd love to get you connected with some of the people that we're working with at OSU that are essentially examining stuff along similar lines and recognizing the need for additional workforce training.
Yeah,
So-
I'm with you, Marcus, and I would love that PowerPoint too. California is struggling with a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of key to the whole effort is bringing in this new mechanized equipment that will eventually lead to lower treatment costs. I mean, we work a lot on the market side, and having markets for this material is key and central and political support, but we also have to be doing it in a way that is most efficient and using the best use of technology, which requires investment and training.
Yeah, it would be great to get connected with those OSU people you mentioned, Marcus. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, we're working with the Tallwood Design Institute, which is an umbrella organization between the University of Oregon School of Design and the Oregon State University College of Forestry and College of Engineering. So I can connect you with the folks at OSU College of Forestry that we're working with. I think it'd be a productive conversation, and mostly, they can learn from you all is essentially the connection there.
Great. So I'm looking through the chat. I see Katie, you mentioned, is this the paper about the need for workforce expansion?
Yeah, the very first paper that you provided, but if you give us the PowerPoint as Marcus requested, then it's in there. So you can ignore me if you're going to show the presentation.
I will try to share all of them. I'll try to share the papers and the presentation. I'll try to put it on the podium after this meeting.
Okay, well, don't feel obligated with the papers because I can pull them from your, your presentation. I don't want to give you extra work unless you want to, in which case it's great.
Yeah, it's not
I'll
that
be as
hard.
lazy as you let me be.
I didn't put like a full citation in the PowerPoint, so it actually might be a little difficult to find them. So I can just share them.
Okay.
Yeah, this has been super helpful. I appreciate it. Just we have a lot of same concerns too, I'm sure everywhere in the West with the workforce, recruiting and maintaining workers and the shortage of log and chip drivers. I think that's been some of the biggest issues that I've seen in the state. So I feel like this forest operations training center is really would be helpful in solving some of those issues. And I wonder if there's something we can do similar in Utah, just because that they don't seem to be going away. We have that aging workforce, so I feel like this is a really good solution to that.
Yeah, and we intend for it to kind of serve the Southwest region also. So, we're not that far from Utah and Flagstaff. So, potentially it could benefit you guys up there as well.
Yeah, definitely know a lot of people, or there's a lot of businesses in the southern part of the state that actually get timber from, I think, northern Arizona. So I feel like that would be very, very useful.
Hey, Damon.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Ann. Just a couple things. One is that this is recorded, so we'll be able to post the recording probably beginning next week on Podio as well. And I guess I had a couple questions. One is, what's the length of time for the training? And it may be dependent on what they're training for, but that was one question. And then also, what is your plan for recruitment? Getting the word out.
I believe that when it comes to the machine operation part of it, it's intended to be an 8-week program. I'm not 100%. I should have seen if Han or Rich could join me because they're more up on questions like that. But yeah, we've kind of looked at, there's a program in Maine that does a similar thing, and then also one in Shasta, Northern California. And a lot of kind of looked at those programs for kind of examples. And I'm pretty sure that the length of the machine operator part of it is going to be 8 weeks. When it comes to the maintenance techs and truckers, I'm not really sure the answer to that one. And then as far as promoting the training center, I think I know that, so we've partnered with Coconino Community College for it. So I imagine that I get brochures from them and that they send out. So I think that they'll probably be a good avenue for promoting it. I'm not sure what other tactics we'll be using for that.
I know that Coconino County's economic development manager is doing some work with it. He's been part of this as well as myself with Rich and Han. And the one thing about the timing that I thought was interesting that Rich and I agreed with is that some of this stuff, they're going to be starting like 5 a.m. They want them to get to feel, what does it mean to be a logger? Doesn't mean you get to come into work at 9 o'clock in the morning to go home at 3. No, it's long days, it's hard work, and you're gonna get a feel of that after that or in some of their field work. So I thought that was a good idea.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, you may know more about some of the actual implementation stuff than I do. So thank you.
No, that's really good and helpful. And one thing, Damon, you might want to mention is, what everybody else is talking about the high schoolers, is some kind of recruiting program at the high schools. Just an idea.
That's an excellent idea.
So I'm going to have to hop off soon, but I did want to mention we were thinking about for the next call, which is November 4th. We rescheduled it due to Thanksgiving. If there's interest in a bioeconomy development zone presentation, and you all can talk about that, but Tom Perry had told me about it. And let me see, I'm reading his email. It says the initiative is a certification and regional risk rating program that enables economic development agencies and communities to effectively and credibly disclose biomass feedstock related risks and promote bio-based development opportunities to developers and investors around the world. And it sounds like this group is anxious to present to various groups. So I thought I'd throw it out there and see if that might interest people, and we can, if so, I could reach out to them and see if they were available.
I think I've heard a little bit about this group, but maybe if there's, I know you're on the phone, but if somebody could dig up later and put a link out that we could learn a little bit more, that'd be useful.
Okay, that sounds good, Marcus. What I'll do is, Tom did attach some items, so I could post it on Podio when I'm back on Monday, and just see what everybody thinks.
Yeah.
All right, well, I guess maybe I'll step out of my presenter role and back to facilitator for the meeting. And we have about 10 minutes or so left. We could open it up to general announcements or a discussion about wood utilization successes or innovations in your area, if anybody had anything to share.
Yeah, if I could just kind of share a couple of things. One, I wanted to let people know that the video series that we produced on mass timber in the Northwest, those videos are done and up on our YouTube channel. And the rest of the kind of companion multimedia piece, which is The Promise of Mass Timber, which is a digital magazine that we've put together. That'll be, the first 3 chapters will be out probably within a month. But I put a link in the chat to the videos, which they're about 5 minutes each, as well as a 2-minute trailer. And then I want to let folks know about our submission that we're putting in for the Biden administration's Build Back Better Regional Challenge, which is going through the Economic Development Administration. And essentially, we've got a coalition of state agencies and the Port of Portland. And we're focusing an initiative, a regional initiative around mass timber construction and affordable housing. And it includes the Port of Portland, Tallwood Design Institute, Department of Land Conservation and Development, the state's Economic Development Agency, Business Oregon, and us at the Department of Forestry. And the way this proposal works is it's $500,000 in the planning grant, and then about 50% of the awardees in the planning grant move to the implementation round, and that's 25 to 75, even up to 100 million. So it's a pretty good chunk of change. And the forest restoration connection for us is to essentially pay for NEPA on national forests to move a bigger quantity of small diameter material off of those national forests that we can make into mass plywood. And that's a veneer product, and so we can take a smaller diameter material. And then we're, of course, developing all of the demand side stuff around trying to make modular mass timber affordable as a social housing solution. So it's kind of taking the manufacturing capability that you have with mass timber and using it to drive down the costs, and producing hundreds of these units at a time in a factory setting versus stick frame. So that's the core of our proposal. It's essentially regional economic development and resilience, and there'll be a big workforce training component that's baked into it, as well as prototyping and research, which comes out of the universities, and then the infrastructure part, which is at the port, and then the supply chain aspects are us at Department of Forestry in combination with OSU College of Forestry. So it's a pretty interesting and feels like a really robust proposal. We've had really good responses so far. EDA seems to like it a lot. The Oregon delegation seems to like it a lot. And it kind of takes the mass timber industry from building one-off high-rise buildings to mass commoditization of modular small diameter material. So we'll be learning more about it, and the submission is October 17th, so it's coming right up.
I was gonna make sure everybody knew the Forestry latest news that the government came back and canceled the second phase RFP after the total process has been close to 3 years, then a year's worth of getting bidders and RFPs submitted and vetted and all the stuff, and then we kept kind of pushing back the date for selection until we got it last Monday, Tuesday. They decided to cancel the RFP based on economic price adjustment requirements. These are the 5 things that they quoted as some of the reassessment needed: acreage and volume of material to be offered, biomass treatment requirements, road maintenance requirements, and cancellation sealing. So obviously we're having to regroup, get some industry folks together in a few weeks to really kind of hash out what do we need? What does the industry need? How do we solve biomass? Or just continue to work this problem that we've been having in Arizona for the last 15, 20 years now. So yeah, I just want to let everybody know that's, and then Gooder Power New Life Forest Products, who's contracted for the first phase RFP, which that ends May 22nd next year, 2022. They have put in a new line, a re-engineered wood line. Pretty much it's taking the lower grade Conroe's pine board, cutting out the knots and regluing, finger joining and regluing them back together to make longer pieces of molding or wood to be able to be processed into molding or whatever. So maybe something in the future if we can we want to try to get somebody from New Life to come and describe that process and what they're doing. I think they just shipped out their first 2 loads in the last 2 weeks, so they're just now getting into operation, and they don't have their real main sawmill up yet. So just a quick update from what's going on here in Northern Arizona.
All right. Thanks, Marcus and Jay. I've also got an announcement. As Annie mentioned earlier, we are hosting a seminar conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And by we, I mean the ERI and the Southwest Ecological Restoration Institutes. Will be November 17th or 18th at the Hotel Andaluz in Albuquerque. It'll be in person. We've got over 20 speakers lined up for a day and a half. We've got SWCA as our primary sponsor for it. And it should be a really good time and a good meeting of folks from kind of the 3-state area: Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. I'll drop a link to our website in the chat. Should be there right now. And I think I'll also probably try to post the announcement to the Podio for the people that aren't at this meeting later this afternoon.
Okay, I'll throw a few things out there from Idaho. So really excited about the presentation in the training center. I really hope that flies. A couple of things we've been doing here in Idaho. We have like Drive a Dozer Day, where kids can of all ages, I mean literally all, can go to like the fairgrounds and get the opportunity to play with different types of equipment with an operator, a skilled operator with them. That's sort of the way local contractors are trying to foster excitement about becoming equipment operators. Extremely popular, you know, we'll see how it works over time. On the idea of the training center, one of the things that Idaho's done in the last, I don't know, 5-6 years is, you know, we recognize the failures of the education system in that all of the old classes that some of us, you know, the shop class and the mechanics class in high school were phased out. And so we have this unskilled, frankly, workforce out there that's never seen a welder, has no idea what it does, or any of that sort of thing, no electronics, no nothing. So we've started creating technical high schools. There's one here in the Coeur d'Alene area that serves our, you know, basically all Kootenai County. And it's actually become extremely popular as an option for some of these kids will opt out of the conventional high school and go to the technical high school where they can get that kind of training. You know, it's only a high school level of training, but our logging contractors and other, you know, contractors in the area seem to be pretty pleased with it. You know, at least they're getting, you know, kids out of there that know what a welder is, you know, have maybe even spot welded a little or something, versus, you know, trying to find somebody in the bar that can learn how to do something. So, you know, there is, you know, at least we're addressing it. I wish it was still back in the regular schools, at least as options for kids, but hey, we'll take what we can get. But anyway, so with all that said, I'm really excited, Damon. I really hope you guys are successful down there. It can lead to something up here. I like where you're going. I agree with Annie's, you know, statement on the or suggestion on accepting the GED candidates for the very same reason that we now have those technical high schools up here. Sometimes there's kids that just, they're not into that stuff, you know, the touchy-feely sociology that's being taught en masse out there, and they're more interested in getting something a little more practical. So see you, Marcus. So anyway, I think where you're going is a wonderful thing, and I honestly, sincerely wish you all the luck in the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Archie. Appreciate hearing that. Any final comments? We're right on time here. So yeah, any last comments before we wrap up? Cool. Well, thanks, guys. Guess yeah, we'll close it out today and then see you again at the next one.
Thanks, Damon. Appreciate it.